the roll call here. Welcome everyone to the CMAP Counties Advisory Committee. My name is Anthony Cefali. I'm in the Government Affairs group here at CMAP. I'm going to walk you through the agenda for this group today. Just a few housekeeping items first. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of August 21st, 2020, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we will post the meeting materials approximately a week in advance and provide a recording of this meeting linked to our website, and we will take all votes by roll call. The first order of business that we will get to is attendees, and I appreciate you all taking the time to come today. We're going to go through and see who is here and approve the meeting minutes for last agenda, for our last meeting back in June. So I'm going to go through down the list of the counties that are represented in this committee. This is your attendance and then a roll call vote for the meeting minutes. Again, that is for June's meeting as well as November of 2019. We ask for the approval of committee for these meeting minutes, not that they are exact transcripts, but that you did not have to be present at the previous meeting, just that you certified the business proceeded manner. So we are just asking for your approval of those meeting minutes as they stand. Going through the roll call, we will begin with Cook County Department of Transportation. Okay.
So Cook County Department of Planning and Development is here. Our colleagues are not.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate you making time.
Mm-hmm.
DuPage County Planning as well as Transportation.
DOT is here.
And this is also, again, the approval of the previous meeting minutes. So I do need a yes or no vote on those. And that goes back to Susan as well as DuPage.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do we have DuPage Planning? All right, moving on, Kane Planning and Kane Transportation.
Jackie Forbes is here for Kane County DOT and yes to the minutes.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, Kendall County Transportation as well as Planning.
Yes, this is Matt Osselmeyer from the Kendall County Planning, Building and Zoning Department, and I vote yes on the minutes as well.
Thank you, Matt. All right, Lake County, we have DOT as well as Planning.
Lake County Planning is here. I have to abstain on the minutes. I have no idea. I'm not aware of what they were.
Tom, they were sent out last week with the meeting invite, and if I'm not mistaken, you were at the last meeting as well.
I don't remember, so I can't vote on them.
Okay.
This is Joe Serdan with Lake County DOT, and I vote yes on the minutes.
Thank you, Joe. McHenry, DOT as well as Planning.
DOT is here. This is Emily filling in for Joe Karpolsky, and we are yes on the minutes.
Thank you, Emily. And that leaves us with WILD Planning as well as Department of Transportation.
Yeah, David and Colin here from the Will County Land Use Department. Yes to the minutes.
Thank you both. And is Christina here? She's normally there from DOT. Do not see her. All right, I'm sure some people will file in as this meeting continues. But again, just a big thank you for everyone and thanks for your patience there getting that together. Welcome again to the CMAP Counties Advisory Committee. We are going to get rolling with some presentations. You will hear from a number of CMAP projects that are ongoing, but the first one that we want to spend some time with is Matt Stern. He will touch on some of our local development incentives guides. I encourage everybody to please use the chat box to ask questions and then mute yourselves during other people's presentations, but we will get to the questions in the chat box and then we will go through those and hopefully we can have some discussions around these topics. But first things first, let's get to the first presentation with Matt Stern. Matt, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, all right, great. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the time. As Anthony said, my name is Matt Stern. I'm a policy analyst in our policy group here at CMAP, and I've been working for the last year and a half or so with a team here at CMAP developing a handbook for local governments in the region about improving the use of local development incentives. We just finished the guide last month. So I'm very excited to share it with this group and get your feedback. My plan is to summarize the findings of the guide, hopefully in 10-15 minutes or so, and then facilitate a brief conversation with you about some of the more sort of difficult or chewy recommendations in the guide and get your feedback about, are these things implementable? How have you seen them be implemented? What are some of the challenges to it? And I'm hopefully picked out some things that are of particular interest to this group. I also want to encourage you to interrupt me at any point, ask a question mid-presentation. There's a lot of content here. I'm going to try to go quickly through some of the context setting content, but if you have any questions or desire for elaboration, just let me know. Next slide, please. So, CMAP has been writing about incentive use for quite some time. It's an issue that is of great import to us because of how widespread incentive use are in the region. And they come at a pretty substantial fiscal cost to local governments in the region. This is despite research that suggests that incentives are not always the most efficient tools to achieving economic development and community development goals. So stepping back for a minute, we look primarily at 4 types of incentive tools: sales tax rebates, tax increment financing, and property tax abatements, as well as property assessment incentive classification in Cook County. When you look at all 4 of these tools and their prevalence around the region, you find that over 3/4 of municipalities in the 7 counties use at least one of these tools. And that's not counting other taxing districts and counties themselves who engage in incentives as well. Altogether, the fiscal cost of incentive use to local governments tallies up in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we believe that evaluating the efficacy of incentive use and identifying ways to improve their use can be really critical. Next slide, please. So On to 2050, for these reasons, includes a clear call for incentive reform, including stronger standards for transparency and accountability, better alignment of incentives with local and regional goals. The plan both tasks the region with establishing criteria and policies for incentive use, but it also tasks CMAP with providing best practices and models to support and inform that conversation. And that's exactly what the guide seeks to do. Before we get into the particular recommendations in the guide, I want to make 2 larger points about incentive use. Next slide, please. The first is and I want to call attention to this tension that we recognize have been grappling with really extensively over the last year, which is that the academic perspective and local perspective on incentives is can be very, very much at odds with each other. Now, on one hand, you have this world of researchers who are, for the most part, agreed that incentives are at best an inefficient tool for community and economic development. and that incentives have concerns are concerning for long-term local and regional fiscal and economic health. For example, many incentives, according to research, don't actually sway business location decisions. Even when they do, they can create bidding wars that drive tax revenues for all local governments down over time. And then the idea that fighting over where in the region new development will locate actually does very little for our competitiveness as a region overall. And so that is this sort of academic perspective. And then there's the perspective on the ground from the practitioner perspective, which in which the use of incentives is often incredibly rational. Every community faces stiff competition from neighbors. Revenue disbursement formulas reward competition, especially over businesses that generate sales tax revenue. And in disinvested communities, issues like slow growth and high property tax burdens can often make incentives feel like one of the only tools in the toolkit. And this is an issue, this sort of tension is one that we've been grappling with throughout the project. Next slide, please. The second issue that I want to bring up is that incentives have a complicated relationship with inclusive growth and racial and economic equity goals. In some situations, incentives can promote equity by artificially leveling tax rates across jurisdictions, decreasing development risks, using negotiations to set expectations with businesses about local hiring or how much they pay or training options. These are all ways in which incentives can be linked positively to inclusive growth goals. On the other hand, incentives have real costs and opportunity costs that can end up having the opposite impact. Incentives can reduce tax revenues that would otherwise be available to fund robust public services, and marginalized communities may not be the ones to actually benefit from new incentivized development. And so recognizing this tension and that sort of how this tension plays out is very specific to individual communities and individual developments being considered is another sort of important larger point that I wanted to make. Next slide. So it was with these sorts of complexities in mind that we set out to write this guide. And we ended up producing something that we hope feels very much like a handbook that can serve as a ready resource for community and economic development practitioners all around the region who work with taxing districts and work for taxing districts who use incentives or consider using incentives. The guide summarizes some of the clear pitfalls to incentive use, some of which I was just talking about, and then lays out a series of overarching principles as well as evidence-based strategies to make sure that incentives are doing the most good and the least bad possible for the region. Each strategy goes on to contain specific implementable practices. There are 60 practices in all in the guide that we really encourage taxing districts in the region to consider adopting. And I recognize that this group is filled with representatives from the counties, and that one of the things that we heard in our interviews with stakeholders around the region is that even though counties are oftentimes themselves less actively involved in the weighing and giving of incentives, they're often looked to by their municipalities as experts in the region and opportunities for informal or formal technical support. And so we are really interested in counties' responses to these recommendations and their interest in promulgating those recommendations, both in their own work and to the work of their municipalities. Next slide, please. So the four principles that we think should guide incentive use by local governments are largely cross-sectional. They apply to a variety of the specific strategies and practices that I'll talk about next. First, we argue that incentives should be performance-driven. They should only be used when they're the most effective tool available, regularly evaluated, and improved over time. Second, incentive use should be transparent. Transparency in a community's process, their goals, their terms, are beneficial to the community, beneficial to that community's constituents, and also beneficial to prospective businesses. Third, incentives should be designed to pursue equity, and communities that give incentives should work with businesses to provide opportunities for neighborhoods and populations that face the largest barriers. Fourth and finally, it would not be a CMAP presentation without this final principle, which is that incentives should pursue regional benefits. Intra-regional competition rarely helps us improve our economic position as a region, and we believe that incentives should maximize broad economic benefits, not just local fiscal gain. Next slide, please. So like I said, the guide includes 10 strategies, and I won't read through all of these now. I just want to give a sampling of what the guide includes. A couple of the strategies that are included in the guide are using incentives to develop community benefits and advance racial and economic equity, making sure that the projects that are being targeted are those that can have the greatest potential for impact, designing incentives to promote high quality employment, and considering non-financial solutions to challenges faced by prospective businesses. And there are 6 others there, and there's lots more about each of these in the guide itself. And after this presentation, I can drop the link to the guide in the chat for you to download. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go into detail about the 2 strategies in the guide that I think might be of most interest to this group. The first is this notion of considering non-financial solutions to challenges faced by a prospective business. This strategy really involves sitting down with entrepreneurs, business owners, and developers, understanding what their needs are, and striking agreements that perhaps try to address those needs directly, rather than providing rebated tax payments that sort of counterweight a challenge that might not be being met. Our argument here is that fixing challenges in this way can be more cost-effective and be more sustainable and keep benefits in the public realm for other businesses to benefit from in the future. So we include both standard practices as well as best practices. Some of these standard practices here include, sharing costs of the development of key sites. If there's a key downtown site, for example, that would really have spillover benefits to the region or to the community, streamlining and clarifying development review processes. And then over in the best practices column, I especially want to draw attention to this. To what degree is it possible to provide public goods and services themselves, whether it's upgraded transportation infrastructure or other things like that, rather than providing a cash or tax incentive. Next slide, please. The other one that I want to draw attention to is this notion of giving incentives in partnership rather than in competition with other local governments. And I appreciate that even saying this is, to some extent, a little bit paradoxical, right? We give incentives to compete, but we also recognize that incentives can have a long-term impact on regional fiscal status and local fiscal status, and want to see what conversations we can start about encouraging a more of a collaborative approach to business recruitment using incentives. So this includes things like avoiding incentives-based bidding wars, making sure that the net impact of incentives on all impacted local governments are considered when a municipality is giving an incentive, things like revenue sharing, cost sharing agreements, and even possibly the notion of a non-poaching agreement to limit intra-regional competition. So with that, Michelle, you can go to the next slide, or Anthony, you can go to the next slide. I just will wrap up to say that I'm really interested in your feedback to this, and to start any sort of conversation that you all as members of this committee are interested in having in response to this work and some of the complexities that I hope this work reveals. A quiet bunch today.
Anthony, you're speaking, but I don't think we can hear you.
I still can't hear Anthony. Is that true for others as well?
Yeah, Anthony, we can't hear you at all. We see that you're speaking, but none of us can hear you, if you can hear us.
While we're waiting for Anthony to figure out his muting issues, I would really encourage any feedback, whether it's further questions or responses to any of these recommendations that I've talked about, or even encouragement of what groups we could bring this presentation to within any of your counties. That's something that we're really excited to do. I can also say that we are doing additional work in this work stream over the coming 6 months, including some research into the prevalence of incentives around the region. And I'd be happy to sort of entertain recommendations for future work on this subject as well.
Anthony, is there a date by which you want to have some feedback? Are there critical dates coming up that you might need some response?
I think I may have my audio sorted out. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
This project is ongoing. I am open to please reach out directly to myself or Matt. This was we wanted to introduce our county partners to the work that we're doing in this space, and we're hoping to continue building this work and this relationship going forward. So there is no real timetable on that. We'd be happy to have a discussion here around it, and I'd be happy to receive your feedback going forward. All right, if there are no immediate feedback items or follow-up items, thank you, Matt, for that presentation. I encourage you all to reach out to him if possible with any follow-up items, and we're really looking to see how people are using this work. So if you have found it practicable, please reach out to us, let us know. With that, I want to move on to Dominic's presentation.
Thank you, Anthony. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Matt, for that presentation previously that will be talked about in this presentation. Thank you to the committee for your time. My name is Dominic Argumedo. I'm a senior planner here with CMAP. I've been at CMAP for about a year. Before that, I have a variety of municipal planning background, working for 5 different entities. And I also have a business undergrad degree, which I've used mainly to get in the good graces of developers when I've talked to them. So, and I think that will come out as we talk about the recommendations here for this plan. The Robbins LTA plan, and formerly known as the Robbins Transit Oriented Development Industrial Areas Plan, was started in 2018 and is now nearing completion. It is with the village for its final comments, and hopefully we will have approval process coming up shortly. It was a joint partnership between CMAP's Local Technical Assistance Program and the RTA's Community Planning Program. And if we could have the next slide, please. Anthony invited me to speak today on the economic aspect of the plan, and we'll get there, but the highlight here is that we're going to be spotlighting a friendly voice. And what does that mean? friendly. What does business friendly mean? Something we hear about consistently, and we'll talk about that. And we still want to communicate Robin's voice in what they want in development. And we'll touch on that when we talk about the recommendations. But before we get there, I'd like to provide some background. If I could have the next slide, please. As we talk about consistently here at CMAP, there are over 284 communities here in the 7-county region. Robbins is in South Cook County. It has just to give you some background, a population of approximately 5,300 and an area of 1.45 square miles, and it has one metro stop, the Robbins Station. It does face some economic development, some economic challenges. 30% of the families live below the poverty line, and the unemployment rate is in the mid-20s, and the household income is approximately $24,000. And with those challenges, though, through the planning process, one thing that keeps coming out is the pride, the incredible amount of pride in the community that is 95% Black. Indeed, this community was founded in 1917 as an oasis from the segregated land use patterns of Chicago by Blacks coming north and wanting their own space. And that pride has stayed even through this economic development challenges, as through our community outreach, consistently it was talked about that residents want to return again to when there was active street life and opportunity within the community, such that in past literature, Robbins was referred to as the model Black town. Next slide, please. So why? So the why part of why is this plan happening now? Robbins is not a community that's lacked for planning over the last 20 years, the first part of this century. In fact, there's been 6 different plans that have come through, a redevelopment study, a brownfield study, a comprehensive plan, a vision and strategy approach, a pedestrian access plan, and a corridor study. So why is this plan happening right now? And what's making it different? Well, the why is that Robbins Park is coming in 2022. It's a 52-acre MWRD stormwater management facility. It's featuring a retention lake surrounded by 30 acres of parkland. That's going to be in the northeast section of Robbins. And there's going to be, it's going to, one, provide an amazing amenity, but it's going to alleviate flooding that's around the Robbins Metro Station. Right now, the 80% of the land is vacant near the Metro Station due to this flooding that's been occurring and damaging housing and not allowing the land to be buildable. So this tangible product, this tangible change in the community is going to occur, and it's going to make this land available. So where we had past plans and there was a desire wanting something to happen, this Robbins Park is providing multiple tangible sparks. When the shovels go in the ground, that's going to be a spark that something's happening in the community. When the ribbons cut for that park, something's going to be happening in this community, and we want to be ready for that. Next slide, please. Thank you. The plan again is a partnership between CMAP, RTA, and the village itself. It focuses recommendations on housing, transportation, industrial, and economic development. These recommendations themselves are incorporating the guiding principles of the ON2 2050 plan. Robbins Park itself is a prioritized investment. It's going to support development, and it's going to reduce community flooding. And it's going to provide that resilience to the community that's been dealing with this flooding for so many years. And it will give Robbins a boost if we can work on capitalizing on this to boost and drive the region's growth for inclusive growth. A lot of growth that it has bypassed Robbins, unfortunately. But this plan is looking to do that. So again, Anthony asked me to speak on the economic aspects of that. So let's look at that on the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, business friendly. Let's talk about that. Business friendly does not mean whatever they want. From my work in community development, business friendly truly means if I do X, Y, and Z, I will get done in A, B, and C. So that's what we're looking for in these recommendations, is to provide clarity in terms of what a developer who comes to Robbins with this new land is going to be able to do. And one of the best ways to do that, one of the foundational must be done aspects, is to update the zoning code, because that's going to be providing clarity in terms of my time frame. If I build so many units of housing, so many units of parking, if I put 10 feet away from the setback, I can get this approved. And it's not, this is not a problem just in low capacity communities, but also in high capacity communities. When I worked for the city of San Francisco, the city wanted to build 500 units of housing, of low income housing at a former naval base. Problem, the comprehensive plan said that this naval base that had been abandoned for 30 years would always remain a naval base. So that threw off the whole schedule, and we had to move so quickly to make sure that we got the funding, because we were not looking at how the approval process was. To be business friendly, you want to make sure that your time and your process is going straight forward, and that's dealing with the zoning code. Around this around the Robbins Metro Station, the community wants it to be mixed use development. It wants it to be residential as well. Right now, it's all zoned for industrial uses. So we'll have to work at that to update the zoning code before the park becomes online in 2022. We have to work at that. We'll also have to work at definitions. Definitions is another hang up that in communities that can happen. I would ask everybody here to think of the development you would want in your community and whether it could get approved. My example I always use is a brew pub. That seems to be hip and trendy. But for example, if you wanted a brew pub in your area, could you build it in a commercial area? Or because 60% of the actual building use was dedicated to manufacturing of beer, would it have to go into the industrial area? And then this developer who you talk to, now it has to be laid 2 months and go through a zoning committee hearing, plan use commission hearing to get that amended. So think of the uses that you would like and adjust your zoning code before you go to the developer. One of the things we'll be looking for in Robbins is to adjust the definition of light manufacturing such that it is not so much the product, but also how it is accomplished. Are all sounds or all gases kept within inside the building? Then it might be compatible to be next to some multifamily housing. But again, we're looking at the definitions to make sure that it's there. Same thing with how Matt talked about with tax incentives. Know what you will want to ask up for in front, and we'll be doing, one of the recommendations is actually using CMAP's tax incentive guide, and we'll be looking at that as well. So I think the part of it, the main part of business friendly is clarity and making sure that businesses understand what needs to be done right there for them. Can we move on to the next slide, please? But that does not mean that the community is losing their voice in any way. In fact, we want to, one of the recommendations we're making about as we move forward is for the village to say your vision up front. One of the things that senior management at Robbins was surprised was about producing an RFP and RFQ for the land around the Metro Station. Earlier, I mentioned that land around the Metro Station is 80% vacant. Well, it's also owned primarily by the village of Robbins through acquiring a good amount of properties. So that takes out some of the middle person aspect of that. A developer would need to come in and rebuild. So what you want to do is to announce to the world what you're looking to do. You own the land, you would like to have this type of development. We are looking for such units, we are looking for such retail. What do we want to be able to find? One way is to announce that as an RFP, a request for proposal and a request for qualifications. Doesn't mean you have to just give it if you don't have the right proposal, but it announces to the world. Another thing we recommended is to go to developers themselves. I mentioned to the village, have they considered attending trade shows? And they said, you mean like the one in Vegas? And we'd all like to go to Vegas, but that's not exactly what I meant right there. There are local trade shows that happen, or in the future, that happen at Navy Pier and that happen in Rosemont, where people attend with developers, with companies such as like Payless and Fast Convenience, And also there was 5 communities in the South Cook area that attended these trade shows and that had booths right there to get out to connect with developers themselves. Now, our recommendation is, hey, 1, attend, see if this is something you would like, go out, collect cards, and then maybe move to a booth, but go and get yourself out there. When I've worked in municipal government, when we've done with RFPs and RFQs, is we've had an email list that we're blasting out to developers. That's one good way to build up your network, is to go out and actually meet the development. And the final bullet point is to amplify your story. Of all these plans that I talked about over the last 20 years, they all talked about how Robbins has a great story. It is located near Midway Airport. It is located near highways. It has $28 million of retail leaving its community to be spent elsewhere. Well, let's amplify that. Let's put that out onto our website. I'm sorry for saying you work with the community for so long, you want to be there, but put it on the website so that it's a developer who stumbles across it and like, oh, wait a minute, they're doing this, or I heard this. Let me look at Robbins and see it up front. Lay it out for them. Also benchmark against your neighboring communities. The neighboring communities of Robbins have a website where they list their vacant properties. Robbins can do that as well. I mean, they can list, and again, advertising what is going to be available when we're coming forward. So the 2 things is to make it business friendly and have your voice, have that friendly voice right there as we're moving forward. You could have the next slide, please. And one of the things that I look forward to is that there is time to implement. I've used an RFP, updating the zoning code, getting the website. These are all big lifts, I admit this, but there is time to implement. The park is scheduled to open in 2022. There is time to make these adjustments incrementally, because even when the park opens, the flooding is going to take time to dissipate. It was time to build that infrastructure, but there is time existing. This is a moment for Robbins, a tangible moment that allows it to change its narrative, change its direction if the implementation can move forward. And CMAP, the RTA, looks forward with working with Robbins as we move forward. So thank you again, once again, to the committee for allowing me the time to present on where we are with this LTA project. And I'm welcome to any questions now or in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic, for that. Just want to open the floor to any questions that folks may have. Again, you can use the chat box throughout the presentation. Feel free to use it now or just unmute. And again, feedback is welcome going forward. So please send either me or Dominic an email. Thank you, Dominic. We have one final presentation here today. We've tried to go through some economic development tools. Hopefully some of these things could be used at the county scale, and we will follow up further with these initiatives. But I wanted to give a little time over to some work that CMAP is doing in transportation that I think we're all could be partners on going. So with that, I just want to get to our last presentation. This is Vicky, who will be presenting on some of our safety goals.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Vicky Jacobson. I don't think I'm CMAP's newest employee anymore, but I'm close. I'm coming up on about 2 months here, and I've been hired in large part to help the agency address some safety concerns in the region. And I'm here today to kind of introduce a new action agenda on travel safety in our region, and would love to have a conversation with you all at the end about how this safety action agenda can serve you and how we can work together to improve traffic safety in our region. Next slide, please. So obviously, travel safety is something that CMAP has always worked very hard on, but there are some emerging trends going on in our region that have made this a very timely thing for CMAP to address. First of all, CMAP is mandated by the federal government to address safety by setting travel safety targets, which are reductions in traffic fatalities and serious injuries. on our regional transportation network. We have not been meeting those targets. We have made our targets in line with the same as IDOT's targets recently. And it's becoming an issue that we're not meeting the targets. So both IDOT and the Transportation Committee at CMAP have asked us to try to tackle this a little bit more aggressively and see what's going on. After decades of improvement in traffic safety, we've seen some trends change for the worse lately. Traffic fatalities, I just mentioned, they're on the rise. And even the reduced vehicle miles traveled during the quarantine in the early part of this year did not change that. And if anything, traffic fatalities increased at a higher rate during the quarantine for reasons that we are still kind of untangling. Some of them are clear, but this is a long-term trend and a short-term trend with the COVID pandemic. The other reason why CMAP wants to take a new approach to this is that there are some new dimensions of safety to consider. We traditionally have been looking at the 4 E's of traffic safety, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But there's some emerging concerns around equity and travel safety that CMAP would like to look at. And we've also seen a growing numbers of and interest in active transportation modes, so biking, walking, transit use, micromobility options. And we want to make sure that any traffic safety agenda includes careful consideration of those modes moving forward. And finally, it's come to light that outside of the roads that IDOT is responsible for, there is not a very concerted effort to address traffic safety on local and county roads. So we're hoping that CMAP can help local governments and county governments better address traffic safety. Next slide, please. So here I'm going to just go over a couple of the overarching trends that have spurred this project into action. And this is these are the traffic fatalities in the CMAP region. So the blue line are the actual fatalities. And as you probably know, the traffic fatalities are often measured in 5-year averages so that you can look at long-term trends. And you can see that the line is starting to bend after decades of decline, and certainly declined since 2006. We're starting to see both the 5-year average and the actual yearly average both increase in traffic fatalities. Next slide, please. And the same is looking to be true for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So we're watching some trends move upward. 2016 seemed to be a year, there are a lot of reasons and theories as to why this is happening. Careful research will help us get to the answers, but you can see that for non-motorized modes, we're also seeing a slight increase in both the 5-year average and the annual number. Next slide, please. So we have tried to break this action agenda, the travel safety action agenda, into a couple of components, which I'll go over today. Next slide, please. We're going to start with people. So what we've recognized is one of the amazing resources in our region are the many partners we have who are working on safety, and certainly within the agency as well. So we're going to first gather some people together to address safety. We're going to do our best to maximize the data, research, and best practices that are available both within our region and nationwide on the topic of travel safety. We're going to put that research and best practices into action through projects. And ultimately, we would like to develop both policies and resources for local governments to address traffic safety. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with the people. Next slide, please. You can see the nice photos of the VUNERF. So the first step in this process is going to be assembling a traffic safety resource group. These will be regional partners who are working on safety, and as I suggested earlier, we really want to address safety comprehensively and from the many perspectives that are needed to understand the very complex dimensions of safety. The resource group will kick off, our goal is to kick off the resource group in January of next year on probably a 1.5 to 2 year schedule with a very mission-driven function of understanding the issues that CMAP can best address on this topic, and then developing an agenda, timeline, and products that can best help the governments in our region address it. And as I said before, the 4 E's, we want to go beyond the traditional 4 E's of traffic safety, which are engineering, education, emergency services, and of course, I'm going to forget the 4th one, but start to address, we have like kind of a new definition of travel safety these days with between the equity lens that we want to bring to it. We have issues related to climate change that we would like to bring into consideration. And, while we're developing this project, we had a global pandemic happen, which also changed some dimensions of travel safety. So that will certainly feed into our understanding of how to move forward. And then ultimately, we would, if this goes as planned, we hope that the seed will be planted in this resource group to potentially build a long-term kind of coalition on safety in the region. What that looks like exactly, we're not sure, but it seems like a topic that's surely important enough and will probably have enough traction to do so. Next slide, please. So the second part of the action agenda is the data research and best practices piece. Next slide. So data is obviously a huge part of traffic safety. Understanding what's happening on our roadways and why is an important piece of developing tools to address it. So there are many existing data sources that we have and can use and might be able to use better. There are also emerging data sources associated with connected devices that we are exploring the potential for and understanding how and why we are having some issues on our roadways, and we hope to, make those data sources more available to local governments if possible. Crash data is, collected at the state level and can be delayed for various reasons because of the ways in which it's collected, which can affect how quickly we can respond to traffic safety issues. So coordinating data collection and making it, highly streamlined in terms of, digital delivery is something that we might be able to assist in and develop an agenda for. The other thing we're looking at with data is some new software that's available that looks at predicting the outcomes of safety issues on our roadways. So rather than waiting for accidents to happen at certain intersections, there may be some potential to identify dangerous conditions before those accidents happen and address kind of widespread safety issues on our roads and have a slightly broader impact with our recommendations. And then finally, we'll assemble the best practices of other regions and municipalities within the region to through the resource group to understand how to apply what's already been tried and been successful. Next slide, please. And then the third part of the safety action agenda are the projects. So this is, you can move to the next slide. This is the what we call the doing while planning part. The first part of the doing while planning is a pilot project that's going to kick off very shortly. It's through the LTA program at CMAP. It's a Flossmoor local road safety plan, and it will give us, the CMAP staff, the chance to understand what local safety needs are and what capacity local government has and how we can best assist local governments in addressing the safety issues on their roadways. It will allow us to hopefully develop interim research and best practices for local governments while we continue this work. The information that we learn through the process of these pilot programs will also, we hope, become something that gets incorporated into our LTA program and other project selection processes, so that when projects apply for funding or the LTA program at CMAP, safety benefits are front and center on the roadway projects. Next slide, please. And finally, the last piece of the action agenda are the policies and resources. So we'll want to, you can advance to the next slide, we'll want to develop products that make local governments have tangible tools and data resources and policy guidance so that they can address safety on the local roadways. While we were kind of brainstorming some of this work, we discovered that 85% of the roadway mileage in our region falls under local and county jurisdiction. So that's a huge percentage of our roadways that aren't being actively incorporated, for example, by IDOT in their safety work. So there's a huge amount of potential to address safety issues on a lot of the roadway miles in our region. It's 55% of the VMT falls on local roadways. So we would love to have a broad impact with this safety work, and not only have with design solutions that are effective, but policy guidance that can make it easier for local governments to affect change. And again, we want to focus on the human dimensions of safety, not just from the different modes that are actually, at work in different intersections, but also be sure to address things like educational programs, behavior change, equity and encouragement programs. Equity and enforcement are sometimes at conflict, and it's an issue that we definitely want to incorporate into our thinking as we make recommendations in this program. Next slide. So after we assemble the resource group, one of the next steps that we will do is decide on focus areas for this work. And there seems to be a lot of gravity, both on a national and a regional level, on speed management programs. And if anything, the pandemic kind of highlighted this, because with the lack of traffic congestion that happened during the quarantine, we saw a lot of problems with speeding on our roadways, and a sharp increase in serious injuries and fatalities related to speeding. So speed management seems to be a topic that we'll probably focus on. It might be the first thing that we jump on. Bicycle and pedestrian safety, growing numbers of these modes in our cities, and many reasons to support them from a climate change and an equity piece. So that's another topic that we seem to be circling around. But one of the things that I'd love to invite a discussion of today, are there other safety topics that you're hearing about in your communities and your counties that we should be considering as policy papers? This is the Traffic Safety White Paper that CMAP produced in 2017. It's an amazing document, and we can put Michelle already put a link to it in the chat. So I encourage you to read this. Updating this paper will be a part of what we do by the end of this project. It's a great overview of all the safety components going on in our region. So that'll be another piece of this project as well. Next slide. Yeah, and with that, I invite you all to chime in. I would love to hear, this project's at the beginning, so, nothing's off limits in terms of traffic issues that you're experiencing in your communities. I'd love to hear if you're having issues addressing traffic safety, if you wish you had resources that you don't currently have, and how you see CMAP potentially helping you address traffic safety. And again, if there are topics that you're interested in the group pursuing that you hear about, we'd love to hear about those too.
Vicki, I thought I would mention that DuPage County is currently also doing a local road safety plan through IDOT, FHWA, and with the consultative services of Atkins. We're about a year into the process presently, and are really kind of getting down to the nitty gritty here. They have about another 6 months to go before the final product is produced, but we're really diving deep into kind of the local road emphasis areas, and it should be fairly interesting. DuPage, I think, was, thanks to CMAP in the early 2000s, we were the kind of recipients of a UWP grant, which ultimately ended up becoming what we call our traffic crash location system, TCLS, which was kind of the predecessor or precursor to the IDOT safety portal. And we've been using that and making that available to all of our municipal partners since that time, since 2004. And they are using that variably to help them decide, and analyze their systems to figure out what, where to expend their energies and resources for safety improvements. It isn't the end all and be all, but it sure gets you a long way, to really understanding and prioritizing the resources that you do have. We've enjoyed that data, and it is, basically it's a 16-year archive of traffic crash experience in DuPage.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I mean, you're hitting on something that we're hearing a lot of, which is certainly there are problem intersections that need to be addressed in a major way. And they have a certain number of crashes. It's just unacceptable. But we're also looking for what is the highest and best use of government dollars to address traffic safety on the broadest possible level, and how can we maximize the value of our work and our investment to make sure that the benefits are enjoyed by everyone. So understanding systemic problems, or problems that occur at many different intersections, those are the kinds of questions we're asking to see if that's a place where we could really have a broader impact.
One of the things that's kind of a drawback to the local road safety plans is that, at least in our case, is that IDOT and toll facilities are not included within that broader LRSP environment. We have over 100 intersections that we share jurisdiction with IDOT on, and municipalities probably a lot more than we do. And without really appreciating and understanding, the impact of crashes on the ability of locals to pay for and maintain a police force in order to record those crashes, it's a very significant impact to the locals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing for us too. They patrol our system as well. So kind of above and beyond just the impact of the crashes is the impact on the police departments and the law enforcement. So it's something that we have to pay attention to.
For sure, they'll definitely be represented on the resource group. Thank you. Anthony, there's one more slide of questions just in case. Oh yeah, please. With some of the...
Yep, I'm Colin Dusing with Will County Land Use Office. One of the things that we've noticed a trend is the pedestrian crossings over major highways, the 5- and 6-lane cross-section roads. Those pedestrian crossings were not necessarily considered when developing those roads at the time. They probably would be today, but at the time they were not. And for whatever reason, that those kind of roads are causing communities to be bisected, and there is no pedestrian crossover along those major roads, even though the residents want them. So it's just a trend that I've noticed, and something to consider, that that those additional pedestrian crossings are necessary, whether it be lights or grade separation or whatever. That's what we've noticed.
That's great. Retrofitting is an important topic for that. Bicycle and pedestrian facilities are being put into existing roadways and can cause conflicts. So we'll definitely incorporate that. Thank you. Great. Yeah, and if I invite you to connect right now, but also as we all have said in today's presentations, you know, we're here to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you think of something after this presentation. The other thing that we want to hear about are other groups in your county or local municipality level that are working on safety that might be good partners for us moving forward. You know, as I said, we'll do a fair amount of work, and then as always, the task will be to put the work out into the community. And that's often done through other groups that are already in existence. So we'd love to hear about partners to work with right now, and then eventually partners to work with on the implementation side of the safety work. So yeah, I welcome your contact anytime on the topic.
Thank you, Vicki, for that presentation. With that, that concludes the CMAP Counties Advisory Committee. This group will reconvene as it traditionally does in June, following the CMAP Transportation Committee meeting in that month. We will be approving the CMAP calendar for committee meetings shortly, so I will have a date for that, and then look for an invitation closer to June. So thank you very much for your time today, and please do not hesitate to follow up with me with any questions you might have, or any of the presenters today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.